this, and as my title says, this is my review for Ring of Honor's Glory by Honor 7. For those of you that are not aware, because I don't believe I did one I know I didn't do one last year. Glory by Honor is Ring of Honor's big fall show. In truth, it's probably their second biggest show of the year in a lot of ways, as they usually bring in a lot of talent from Noah in particular, and try to have, while the WrestleMania Saturday show is usually a bigger event in some ways, and is very much looked forward to, this show is often kind of has the biggest matches, I would say, of any of the other shows, including a Final Battle, which usually has, a lot of ending feuds and starting new feuds. In a lot of ways, they're WrestleMania. This is more, has a lot of big matches. They usually bring in a lot of guys from Noah and such. So there you go with that. Now, I will say this right now. I don't know if this will actually happen, but I probably will be a little harder on this review about Ring of Honor than I am normal ones in some ways. Not just because of what I thought of the show, but because if you watch this show, I've watched the first LAX show, and to watch the second LAX show, I've watched about half of it. You can kind of maybe see what Kerry was seeing when he got rid of Gabe. There is definitely something wrong, I would say, with those two shows that I've watched fully, and there was something definitely missing so far from the show I watched about half of. This show in particular, there was a lot of weird booking decisions, particularly in building the card, I would say. I think there could have been a better job. I will get into that. Even though I do think this was a good card, there was a lot of things that were just kind of hit and miss, and I will get along with that. But we started the night out with Jerry Lynn versus Kenny King, which was a pretty good little match. Wasn't anything horrible. Was a good little opener and very enjoyable. Jerry Lynn got to show what he could do. Kenny King got to be in there with Jerry Lynn, and it was pretty good. They worked very well with each other, and Jerry Lynn definitely got to show in front of the Philly fans that he was still, as even they chanted, he still had it. So it was a nice little match, and it was good to see Jerry Lynn out there doing his thing, so that was nice to see. Next we had the rematch from New York, Brent Albright versus Adam Pearce for the NWA title. Kind of shot this was the second match of the night. Did it live up to their first match from Death Before Dishonor? No, that would be a pretty tall order, to be honest, between these two. But this was still a very good match, I would say. But I would still, it was just definitely missing a lot of the drama that the first match had. This is one of the matches where, and I don't necessarily blame Gabe for this, but I definitely think Brent Albright could have been used elsewhere on this card, unless the NWA was just like, we want him to drop the title at this show. If not, he could have dropped the title at an NWA show somewhere else, and then used him elsewhere on this card. But that's just kind of my thoughts on it. But this was, I'm sure that they wanted to have, that Gabe also probably wanted to have the rematch on this card, and that's where we had it. It was still a very good match. It was just missing a lot of the drama from the first one, but it still worked. I enjoyed it a lot, and it was definitely some old school goodness, I would say. Then we had Go Shiozaki versus Kevin Steen. This was a lot of fun. Some good comedy, as I've always said. Go really surprised me because he does understand how to work an American crowd, and Kevin Steen was just being awesome, Kevin Steen. Not a great match, but still a very good match, I felt. A lot of Go. Both of them pretty much did their things, and it was a lot of fun. They did some comedy spots, which I'm always a big fan of in pro wrestling. There's not enough comedy, in my opinion, in a lot of pro wrestling, and I wish there was more of it. But anyways, again, this is the first match, I would say, even though I do think Brent Albright could have been used elsewhere, but I kind of understand where that match was. To me, because El Generico took on Nigel McGuinness for the title on this card. While I will freely admit, and I think most people will, that El Generico is very over, and that they had a good match in, I believe it was Cleveland. on this card, on one of your biggest cards of the year, I really think that Kevin Steen, who is, I would say, the bigger star of the two between Steen and Generico, that he should have been the one taking on Nigel McGuinness. There may have been some booking problems with that, or storyline problems, but I think you could have worked through that and had Generico taking on Shiozaki for the FIP title, because this was for the FIP title, because I do think that those two work pretty well together. I've seen them work well together before, and I think you would have had the ROH title match would have probably had a little bit more meaning to it than what it did. So that is the first kind of booking decision I kind of question on this card, because really, Kevin Steen, I would say, is the bigger star, and so you would imagine he would be the guy that would kind of, if you're going to have a co-main event, would co-main event this card, but that's not the way they chose it, so anyways. Next we had Bryan Danielson versus Nakajima. This was a great match, what you would expect from these two. This was for the GHC Junior Heavyweight title, which Bryan Danielson had just won, and was very good, excellent. You had Nakajima basically doing a lot of kicks, a lot more of the, Puro style, and Danielson doing a lot more, or I shouldn't say Puro style, but a lot more stiff style, and Danielson doing a lot of ground work and that sort of thing. They worked very well off of each other. It was a very good match. The fans were very into it, particularly during the end. During the end, it got really, really, really great, and it was a lot of fun. I was just really enjoying this match, and unfortunately, it was so early, which kind of hurt the pacing of the rest of the card. But hey, definitely was the match of the night, and was just awesome to watch. Next, we had Erick Stevens versus Rhett Titus. Again, this was pretty much this match didn't go very long. It was kind of a squash of Rhett Titus, and again, I think you could have used Erick Stevens somewhere else and gotten the same kind of match out of it. This did lead to the next match, though, with Roderick Strong and the Vulture Squad taking on Chris Hero, Eddie Edwards, and Shane Hagadorn. So I kind of understand that part of it, but I definitely think you could have stuck Erick Stevens if he was the guy you could have picked to take on Sasuke, because he was on this card. This was the card he was on. Not too much after he won the GHC heavyweight title, I believe, and it was, I think he could have put on, I'll get to that, but I would have rather seen him there than, kind of in a job match against Rhett Titus. But I'm sure that, they wanted Sasuke to be higher up on the card, so, there was that. This was okay. It was short, but it was good for as short as it was. I would say that. Next we have Roderick Strong versus the Vulture Squad versus Chris Hero, Eddie Edwards, and Shane Hagadorn. This was very good, this was a good match. I wouldn't say very good, but this was a good match. A lot of good spots, a lot of inventive spots, just a good fun. Whenever you have the Vulture Squad, I often say this is what, in a lot of ways, an X Division multi-man match should be. Unfortunately, they very seldom are, but this is what they should be. It was very fun. I really enjoyed it, really kind of, the fans were really into this too. It was just a lot of fun to see, and really enjoyed it. Next we had Sasuke versus Claudio Castagnoli, which was to be honest. I'm not a big Sasuke fan, and I will say that. Never have been, probably never will be. In that I've watched him for a long time. I'm not the big, the guy's good, but I've never really seen him as the great guy that a lot of people have, unless he's in there with someone who was great. And when they announced this match, I was like, Claudio, man, that's not going to be very good. And they gave it time so that it was almost good. I gave it 2 3/4 stars, but it wasn't as good as it should have been. I would say, particularly, this was about I would say, just a just like when Morishima took on Necro Butcher. Very similar to that. wasn't as good as it definitely should have been, in my opinion. And to be honest, I think they picked the wrong guy, because Claudio isn't the guy I would have picked. I think Kevin Steen would have been, if you really were hard on Generico going for the title, Kevin Steen would have been better in this position. Erick Stevens, I think, would have been better. I think he would have had a really good match. And if Brent Albright hadn't been NWA champion, I definitely think he should have been in there. It always amazes me that Brent Albright is not paired up with the Noah guys, because to me he works a style that would work very well with just about every Noah guy, particularly the heavyweights when they bring them in. And it really amazes me that they don't use him more with those guys. Maybe they don't want to work with him. I don't know. But it's always been something that I've noticed. But this was definitely just okay. Not as good as it should have been. Probably not as good as I'm sure ROH was hoping it would be. So, and like I said, I really think that falls onto Gabe for booking this match, because Claudio, to me, even when they announced this match, I wasn't too thrilled about it, being that I'm not a Sasuke fan to start with. So, anyways, next we had Nigel McGuinness versus El Generico, as I mentioned, for the ROH title. This was good. That was about it. It was just kind of there in a lot of places, as the fans weren't really into it. It was kind of boring in parts. It had some exciting points, and then it would just kind of die for a little bit, and then get exciting again, and you were just kind of like, it's just kind of there. Again, I think Kevin Steen would have been a much better choice for this spot, and El Generico taking on Go. I think the fans would have been more into it, and I think we would have been able to do more with it. But given the fact that they didn't do that, this was just kind of there. The fans, while into Generico, particularly near the end, I see did a really good job of playing, kind of the underdog. But it was a little, the last little fury was just kind of a little too late, in my opinion, and was just kind of there. And then we had Steel Cage Warfare, which featured the Briscoes, Austin Aries versus the Age of the Fall of Tyler Black, Delirious, and Jimmy Jacobs. And then the wild card, who was actually his own team, which made absolutely no fucking sense whatsoever, of Necro Butcher. Now, people will say, well, it made sense, and then he's supposed to be the wild card, and it's his own man now. But, I mean, you're basically talking 3-on-3 versus 1. That makes no sense whatsoever. It would have made much more sense if it had been 3-on-3, and then the last guy to come out. Basically, the way these work is it's kind of War Games rules, but you have to eliminate your opponents. So, you start with 2 guys, 3 minutes pass, 2 more guys, 1 more guy comes out, that sort of thing. The last guy to come out should have been Necro, and then Necro chooses which side he was going to be on. That would have made more sense. This was definitely much more, I would say, of a hardcore type of match. I mean, they brought in chairs, they brought in barbed wire. It was that sort of thing. And the weird thing is when they brought in a lot of this stuff, Necro was already gone, which was kind of odd. The whole Necro thing just was a very odd part of this, and showed some very just whacked out booking, I would say, when it came to this match. The part of the booking that did work with this match was Daisy Hayes and Delirious had a little confrontation, which worked really well. The fans bought. But other than that, it was just a good hardcore match, is all this was. I mean, there was chair shots, there was barbed wire, but none of it really seemed to mean anything. The intensity that was there, that you would think would be there for this match, just was really missing. It wasn't nearly as good as it should have been, I would say. I know a lot of people had a lot of high expectations for this match because of the first Steel Cage Warfare match, but to me, this wasn't going to live up to that, simply because you didn't have the same type of guys in there. But this match should have been better than it was. It definitely, I would say, under-delivered. I still think it was good, but it just wasn't what I was expecting. Maybe that was part of it, because it wasn't what I was expecting, but it still wasn't nearly as fulfilling as I think it should have been, particularly for, kind of this ultimate match that this was supposed to be. And like I said, the Necro thing just really hurt it. The way they booked the match, particularly near the end, was just kind of there. It was just kind of just there. to be honest. It was good, but it was just at the same time, it was like, eh. I was very indifferent about it. And I'm very indifferent about this pay-per-view. While I think it was a good pay-per-view, if you go through and you look at how I rated the matches, if you watched a lot of these matches by themselves, you would go back, oh wow, maybe this wasn't too bad of a pay-per-view. But then if you actually watch the pay-per-view, it's just a good pay-per-view. I mean, that's all it is. It's just kind of like or not pay-per-view, but DVD. I mean, it's long too. I mean, this is almost 4 hours long, so it's just kind of like, what was the point of that? Particularly since this is supposed to be one of your biggest shows of the year. Like I said, a lot of weird booking stuff. The way they set up the way that the matches they had on the card, some of them I was just kind of wondering about. Like I said, Brent Albright versus Adam Pearce, that's probably not so much Gabe's doing as much as, them wanting to have the rematch and the title change to be on an ROH show, which I understand. And like I said, I would much rather have Sasuke take on Brent Albright. But if the fact he can't take on Brent Albright, you still have Kevin Steen, even though I thought Kevin Steen should be taking on, I can't think of his name, Nigel McGuinness. And even if you had that, you still had Erick Stevens, which you still could have done the same angle, unless Sasuke felt like he had to go on third to last, which then I can kind of understand all of that, but I just think there was better ways to do this than what was done. Because the thing with Erick Stevens, I think you could have changed that up a little bit. There was just a lot on this card that was just kind of, not that it was bad, but it was just kind of like, huh? Lot of scratching your head type of booking, and you can definitely see where I think Kerry would be like, huh, this show should have been a lot better, should have been, if you look at the talent that was on this card, this should have been a lot better than it was. Why wasn't it any better than it was? And I think maybe this is where kind of it started to rattle around in his head that maybe, Gabe, in his opinion, maybe needed to go on his own way, because if you don't know this, Gabe didn't work well with others, and that was one of the reasons why I think he probably felt he needed to let Gabe go, because he probably felt Gabe would not work with somebody else, which is one of the things a lot of people had been saying Gabe needed, was somebody else to throw ideas off of. But if he wasn't able to work with somebody else, then that's a big problem when it comes to that. So, like I said, this is a good DVD. I wouldn't recommend it myself. I give it a 7.25, but that's purely on match quality. As it has a lot of good matches on it, and it has one great match on it. But if you watch this whole thing, it's just kind of there, and it's just kind of like, this is okay. But it's definitely not something great, and definitely not as good as it probably should have been. So there you go. There is that. Like I said, a lot of weird booking on here, particularly in the main event. I really don't get why, in God's name, Gabe thought Necro by himself was a good idea, particularly since Necro was like the most over guy out there during this match, because they were in Philly, and this was pretty much a hardcore match, and you got rid of him pretty much right away. So that was kind of strange, but what you gonna do, I guess. Just some weird booking on this show, and some of the matches they had. Like I said, I think you could have easily picked other guys to be, in some of these matches with some of these guys, and you would have gotten, I don't know about a better card, but I do think the card would have been better because of it. I think a lot of things would have felt better, and maybe the show would have flowed a little better, because like I said, the show was just kind of there, and there you go. Anyways, I guess I will see you guys later. Talk to you about Genesis, as this might be my last TNA review I do. We'll see. We'll see if Genesis can deliver. I'm having a little bit more faith after watching Impact. I will say that, but we'll wait and see. But anyways, I'm out. Have a good one. Later.